Today I'm going to talk to you about the terribly sad death of Anne-Marie Smith, who was a 54-year-old lady who lived at 1 Bradman Circuit at Kensington Gardens and died on the 6th of April this year in the Royal Adelaide Hospital, and her death has now been declared a major crime. Police became involved in her death following a complaint made by medical practitioners to the Health and Community Services Complaints Commissioner about the standard of care that Anne had received in the period leading up to her death. As a result, the coronial investigation section was advised. That's a section within Major Crime Investigation Branch which works for and on behalf of the coroner. As a result of a preliminary investigation undertaken by them, we were able to identify that Anne died in disgusting and degrading circumstances and that her death was most likely preventable. There's now a simultaneous manslaughter and coronial investigation being undertaken, and Task Force Giles has been formed and is being led by Major Crime Investigation Branch. That task force comprises people from Major Crime, Coronial Investigation Section and Metropolitan Operations, and is being supported by Financial Investigators and Digital Evidence Section. I can tell you a little bit about Anne. As I said, Anne was 54 and she suffered cerebral palsy, and in recent years had become completely unable to care for herself. She lived alone in a nice house at Kensington since 2009 when her parents died, and the outside of the house gives no indication as to the horrors that perhaps were occurring within it. She was on what's called a person-centred support plan, which is a plan developed with carers to provide her a level of support consistent with what we would all expect. That care was funded under the NDIS, and her care was delivered through a local company here in Adelaide. It's not my intention to identify that company today or the carer. I can say that the carer provided care 7 days a week for up to 6 hours a day since 2013. The picture you see there is Anne some years ago, but she had had a steady decline since that photo was taken, and as I say, was now unable to care for herself, had been unable to walk or use a wheelchair for some years, and there was allegations she may not have left the house for a number of years. She also has a gardener who attends and helps to maintain the property. On the 5th of April, the carer attended and became concerned about Anne's condition, which had deteriorated significantly, and she was in a semi-conscious state. Ambulance officers attended, conveyed her to Royal Adelaide Hospital, where she subsequently underwent major surgery to remove rotting flesh from severe pressure sores on her body, and then she immediately went into palliative care. The following day, Anne died in the Royal Adelaide Hospital from profound septic shock, multi-organ failure from severe pressure sores, issues connected with her cerebral palsy, and as well was found to be suffering from malnutrition. As I say, it was a nice house from the outside, it was in a nice suburb, but sadly Anne was living in disgusting conditions inside. Unable to care for herself, she was living her days and sleeping at night in the same woven cane chair in a lounge room for over a year, with extremely poor personal hygiene, and as I say, unable to care for herself. That chair had also become her toilet, and there was no fridge in the house, and investigators were unable to locate any nutritional food in the house. Last week we searched the offices of a company providing care and seized records from that company, and today we've attended an address at Hectorville and conducted an interview with the carer and a search of the carer's home and seized a number of items. The investigation is in its infancy, but as it progresses it will be a protracted and complex investigation and rely heavily on medical experts. We've been in contact with NDIS and have been receiving excellent support from NDIS investigators. And as I say, this was a preventable death and is now being treated as a manslaughter investigation. The investigation will examine the role of not only the carer, but anybody who had a role or was meant to have a role in providing care to Anne. And we need to get to the bottom of everything that's happened and to do everything we can to make sure that something like this never happens again. We would ask that anybody that was friends with Anne, anyone who had contact with her since 2013, or anybody who had raised concerns about Anne's care, to contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000, and also anybody that has seen anyone going to or from 1 Bradman Circuit at Kensington Gardens in the last year. I'm happy to take questions.
Was it just a single carer that was responsible for her, or was it a staff?
A single carer.
Have there been any access to her finances that were sort of unexplained?
It's too early to tell, but we have engaged a financial investigator, and there will be a significant focus on her financial affairs.
Is there any idea how long she was at that house for before the carer turned up on that date?
She's been at the house, I think it was since 2009. She's been at the house. She is meant to have a carer come every day for 6 hours a day, and it should have been an ordinary daily visit by that carer.
So is there any idea of how long she was there by herself before the carer coming in?
Well, independent of the level of care the carer should provide, the carer would have been there 6 hours the day before, should have been here 6 hours this day, but of course she's on her own for 18 hours a day.
Would you say this person applied full-time care, not just 6 hours?
I'm not a medical person, but that'll certainly form part of the investigation. I mean, she's unable to go to the toilet on her own, she's unable to bathe or wash herself, she's unable to feed herself. I'll leave that to everybody's imagination.
Who raised the alarm?
The medical people who were involved contacted the Complaints Commissioner, and then they contacted Coronial Investigation Section. We've spoken to a number of neighbours. There may be other neighbours that may be able to assist, but people who live around the area are cooperating, but she was rarely seen in recent times.
Did she have any family, obviously some traditional parents in the past, did she have any other family?
Her mum and dad had died. I understand she's had a brother, but she doesn't have contact, and the information I've got from investigators that she hasn't had contact with him for a long time. I'm not sure of the circumstances surrounding that. She has a person who she describes as her next of kin, who's a close friend who lived in the southeast of the state.
Are you able to elaborate on the
As I say, it's a nice house in a nice suburb, and the actual layout of the house is fine, but basically Anne occupied a cane chair near the rear of one of the rooms towards the back of the house. That's the only part of the house she used, and she basically lived in that chair day and night. Yeah.
What words would you use to describe the fact that she wasn't found at this?
It's not so much not a matter of not being found. Every day she has a carer come in. The question for us is, how did Anne become so unwell when she has a full-time carer and people entrusted with her care?
Essentially, this carer, or these carers, put her in this chair and she didn't have any capacity to...
I'm not sure who put her in the chair, but certainly she has no capacity to get out and walk around. She used to use a wheelchair. The wheelchairs were in another room, appear not to have been used. The information we have at this stage is that she spent her days sitting in that chair. She slept in that chair, and that had been her life for at least a year.
And in terms of the company, you mentioned that you were looking for one over time, but is that really that's the only company that you have dealing with her in that year? There wasn't a switch?
It's changed when the NDIS came in, but it's been the same company for a few years.
Anyone?
Thank you.